The English composer Henry Purcell wrote the opera Dido and Aeneas in the late 17th century. Sometime in the early 18th century, the score to the prologue went missing. But what could that have to do with Canberra? Well, Geoffrey Lancaster is one of our pre-eminent musicians. His various posts include one as Associate Professor at the ANU School of Music, and he has rewritten a Purcell prologue. This new production features hip-hop, a cast of more than 40 and a chamber ensemble led by Lancaster on harpsichord. Hip-hop and Baroque, who'd have thought? Tonight's world premiere is at 8, so we'll preempt them by a few minutes. Kate Evans reports.
Yeah, the story of Dido and Aeneas in a nutshell is boy meets girl, Aeneas meets Dido, they fall in love, witches decide that they'll thwart the relationship and end up creating context where Dido kills herself and her lover Aeneas dies at sea. Very uplifting.
Yeah, so Robert, let's have a look.
This opera by the English composer Henry Purcell, Dido and Aeneas, it's standard part of the opera repertoire now, but it wasn't always that way. It was brand new in, we think, 1688, 89, maybe even 81. We don't quite know. We certainly know it got a performance as a revival performance at a girls' school in 1689, and that it took a long time for it to cotton on. People didn't realise how brilliant it was. From the revival performance at the girls' school, there was a printed text, so we know what the words were. But for some reason, half of the music of this opera has been lost. And the bit that's been lost is what's called a prologue, which had to do allegorically, in fact, with the coming of William and Mary to the throne of England. So what I've done is taken the words of this prologue and I've set them to music in the style of Henry Purcell. I'll tell you, it's amazing. You realise that Henry Purcell is great, everybody knows this, but when you sit down and start to analyse what he's done with his music so that you can actually copy it, you begin to realise what an absolute genius this man was. It's passionate music, it's buoyant, beautiful, filled with life, filled with passion, and at the same time he sets the rhythm of English words consummately well.
It sounds like a daunting task to try and write music that will fit with his music. How did you go about it?
Yeah, it's a hard act to follow, unfortunately. But what I did was I took some of the choruses from other works that he's already written and rejigged them so that I could insert these new words into his choruses. And then occasionally I wrote a few movements myself. And that was a daunting task, as you say, because one has to be as good as Henry Purcell, if you can be. That you had once a thought of leaving me.
So you don't anticipate what the response is going to be.
I guess what I'm doing with it is totally reworking it within a contemporary setting. So it's very much street art inspired, and we're drawing upon urban street culture, and there's a couple of hip-hop artists in the work who dance their way through it. And I guess if I was to be asked why I've done that, it's because I'm working with young singers, and part of their education is learning how to develop characters in a process, and I didn't want them to be in a world of sort of received interpretation. So we have, you know, some very coarse opera acting that's based on, you know, productions that are pretty standard. I really wanted them to sort of reimagine things from the ground up, and I wanted them to work with an idiom that they were really familiar with.
Of course, what we're doing with this opera production is using instruments from Henry Purcell's time, 17th century instruments. We're using harpsichords, guitars, harp, as well as the usual and to be expected string instruments, violins, viola and cello and double bass. So it's quite an interesting combination of musical colours.
And how do those early instruments fit with the modern sort of hip-hop flavour of this particular performance?
When I first heard about it, I thought, yes, how will that go? But having sat in on rehearsals, what I'm finding remarkable is that the shapes of hip-hop dancing, the phrasing of hip-hop dancing, the sense of stress and release of tension, the creation of curlicues and the release of that energy, it's utterly 17th century and 18th century. It's unbelievable. I suppose it goes to show that there's nothing new under the sun, really.
And for me, watching the prologue in rehearsal feed into Dido and Aeneas, I guess, as people might understand it, has brought to me a completely different understanding of, I guess, the nature of performance in a 17th century context, and maybe how audiences would have responded to the work, which I think is a more complete a form of entertainment, because we actually travel from, the cheesiest of sort of comedy right through to, absolute devastation of Dido's lament. So it's a much longer journey.
And there's another performance at 8 tomorrow night and one at 4 on Sunday. It's at the Street Theatre, but we're told tickets are selling fast.